How does a boy who sold sesame bread on the streets of Istanbul become the most powerful man in Turkey since the sultans? Why would a poem be enough to throw him in prison? And how did one night in 2016 change the fate of 80 million people forever? Stick with me until the very end because I'm going to share a story about a football contract that almost stopped the rise of Erdogan before it even began. Welcome to Not Another Greek History Podcast, the podcast that aims to be exactly what it says. I'm your host, Onofrios Dovlepis, and together we'll discover the not-so-frequently told stories of Greece's history that will change the way you view things forever. So obviously you might be wondering why on earth I'm doing something about the Turkish president, but it has to do with his rhetoric and the things that he's been saying about Greece. Not just him, in general the prime ministers, presidents of Turkey over the past decades, because Greece and Turkey go a long way back. So to understand the current president of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, you have to understand where he came from, because he came from a tough working class neighborhood of Istanbul. In the 1950s and 60s, it wasn't a place for the weak. Erdogan was the son of a Coast Guard captain. To make extra money, he sold sesame bread, snacks, and water to drivers stuck in traffic. He learned two things on those streets: how to speak to the common person and how to fight for what he wanted. By 1994, the Turkish people were sick of the same old politicians. Erdogan ran for mayor of Istanbul, and against all odds, he won. People were scared though. They thought an Islamist leader like him would ban alcohol and force everyone maybe to change their lifestyles. But Erdogan was a smart guy. He focused on the basics. Istanbul had a major garbage and water problem, so he built hundreds of kilometers of pipelines. He solved the smog problem by using natural gas. He also handled the massive debts of the municipality. Turkey has a history of military coups and strict laws against mixing religion with politics. So in 1997, at a public speech, Erdogan recited a poem. The mosques are our barracks, the domes are helmets, the minarets are bayonets, and the faithful our soldiers. That was viewed as incitement to religious hatred. They didn't just fire him, they sent him to prison. Many thought this was the end for him, but for Erdogan, prison was just another opportunity. He was seen as a martyr. When he was released 4 months later, he wasn't just a former mayor, he was now the leader of a movement. In 2001, he formed the AK party. He was smart, as we said, so he didn't call it an Islamist party. He called it Conservative Democratic. He promised to bring Turkey into the European Union and fix the economy. Turkey seems to have this craving to be part of Europe, although it has no connection to it whatsoever. Turkey's only relations with Europe have always been non-friendly, to put it mildly, unless the Europeans, the Western Europeans that is, thought that they had something to gain out of Turkey. I don't know why Turkey thinks it has a place in Europe, but they seem to have also brainwashed the Turkish people themselves about that. So there seems to be, from personal experience, I can tell you this, some bitterness towards Europe for not accepting them. Erdogan a few weeks ago, now it's May 2026, even said that he doesn't get how Greece became part of the EU, the European Union, but Turkey hasn't. And of all countries, he mentioned Greece. Greece, which is the beginning of Europe itself. Europe is a Greek word. Do keep in mind that Europe is more of a cultural concept than a geographical one. So, for example, Iceland is part of Europe, although it's far, but Turkey isn't, although it's much closer, so it's not really about that. In 2002, Erdogan won the elections. Because of his legal ban, he couldn't become prime minister right away, so he pulled the right strings until the laws changed. For the next decade, Turkey's economy boomed. He built bridges, tunnels, schools, you name it, faster than ever before. He even built a new presidential building in Ankara, the capital, with over 1,000 rooms. He was sending a clear signal. The old Turkey was gone. The new Turkey was here, and he was not just at the center of it, he was its face. I'm not sure how new this Turkey is because it just seems to continue the same old rhetoric against Greece and the Greek island of Cyprus and to be hostile according to how it's convenient for them. Turkey occupies the northern part of Cyprus since 1974. I've done 2 episodes about this, by the way, that you could listen to. Erdogan stated, if someone has ambitions for our territories and is looking for adventures, I love it, we will not hesitate to respond. Whoever extends his tongue against Turkey will be burned. Not sure what that means because Greece doesn't want to and couldn't possibly take Turkey over. The biggest turning point came on July 15th, 2016. Fighter jets even flew over the capital, Ankara. A faction of the military was trying to take over. They bombed the parliament and even attacked the presidential building. Erdogan was on vacation, but he appeared on a news anchor's phone and told the people to take to the streets. So thousands of people stood in front of the tanks. The coup eventually failed, but it had changed everything. Erdogan used it as an excuse to get rid of his enemies, arresting thousands of soldiers, judges, and teachers. That became his ultimate consolidation of power. And part of this is his rhetoric against Greece, which of course helps him internally. So this is exactly what prompted me to do this episode. The Turkish parliament, for example, directly challenges Greek and Cypriot maritime rights. That's because Turkey wants to drill, fish, and establish marine parks in contested waters across the Aegean Sea and the Eastern Mediterranean Sea, contested only by the Turks. They also want Greece to demilitarize a long list of Aegean islands, such as Lesbos, Chios, Samos, Rhodes, Kos, and Castellorizo. All of them are practically much closer to the coast of Turkey. We're talking about minutes away, rather than to the rest of Greece, to mainland Greece. In antiquity, the coastline of modern-day Turkey, both west and north, was full of Greek cities. And that's why, of course, it made sense that Greece had all these islands which would have a connection to some mainland, which was back then part of Greece. And now it's not. So the islands are kind of left on their own, away from what is now the mainland of Greece. Those were places where, for example, Homer was from, where philosophy was born. And it includes even one of the most famous ancient Greek cities that usually people see when they do a cruise, Ephesus. And I've talked about all of this in an episode which I will put in this episode's description so you can listen to that. And by the way, don't hesitate to send me your comments or suggestions about what should I do next. Recently, the Turks said that historically, Greece's largest island, Crete, almost entirely is rightfully theirs. I'm not sure what that statement even means because historically, they have nothing to do with this part of the planet. And if we get to who was here first and all that, no, I was here first. No, I was here first. Greece definitely was here first. It wins. And at least 1/3 of modern day Turkey should be part of Greece. But you don't hear the Greek Prime Minister saying stuff like that. The ones who invaded are the ones who think they have more rights. Some of those claims they base on whatever treaty is more convenient for them at the moment and choose to discard the latest ones. Keep in mind that a term in a treaty was that they would respect the Greek population of Istanbul. Again, for those that don't really know that, Istanbul, not Istanbul itself right now, but the first city, which is called Byzantium, was established by the Greeks almost 3,000 years ago. So the Greeks have always lived in the city. So instead of respecting the Greeks of Istanbul, in the 1950s and 60s, the time when Erdogan was growing up, the Turks did a pogrom against the Greeks and even deported thousands of people. And I've talked about this again in some episodes which you should definitely listen to. At the same time, Greece has maintained the Turkish minority, which is actually close to the borders with Turkey. And that, unfortunately, gives Turkey a bigger motive to claim northeast Greece. Erdogan is also annoyed by the expanded presence of American and French troops at Greek military facilities. He has publicly complained that the map of Greece resembles an American military base. So from time to time, he repeats that Turkish forces could invade Greece and come suddenly one night. That's a quote. Recently, the Turkish media said that Turkey will not allow Greece to do anything, even in the middle of the Aegean Sea, without their permission. They also announced that we might go to war in autumn. They're setting a date for that. And that if anything happens, it will be Greece's fault. But they're the ones who are announcing that. But here is where the story gets deeply ironic. Erdogan's stance against Greece is a bit odd because despite his Turkish nationalism, some historical and genealogical records suggest he may have Georgian, Armenian, or Greek roots. Let's see why. His family originates from the region of Pontus. Pontus is the northern coast of modern-day Turkey, and it's an area defined by nearly 3,000 years of Greek presence. The ancient Greeks called the Black Sea Evxinos Pontos, meaning the hospitable sea, as a euphemism because it was quite rough and inhospitable. Some of the ancient Greek cities there are Sinope, the birthplace of philosopher Diogenes or Diogenes, Trapezus, modern-day Trabzon, Amisos, modern-day Samsun, from the Greek phrase isamison, which means to Amisos. So that's how we get the word Samsun. Similarly, keep in mind, from the Greek phrase Istimbolin, we get the name Istanbul. Or we have also Amasya, the home of geographer Strabo, and many, many more. Have you ever wondered what happened after the tragic sack of Constantinople in 1204? Did Byzantine civilization simply vanish? When the Fourth Crusade destroyed Constantinople 8 centuries ago, members of the Komnenos dynasty fled and created a new independent Greek state in the Black Sea, the Empire of Trebizond. Today that would be part of Georgia, Russia, Turkey, and Ukraine. Against all odds, this empire survived for over 250 years. It actually outlasted Constantinople just for a few years. It became a major center for learning and for Orthodox Christianity. The most famous symbol is the impressive Sumela monastery, built high up on a cliff. And to this day, if you asked any Greek to tell you one Pontic city, they would all mention Trebizond first. The end for the empire finally came in 1461 with Sultan Mehmed II, the one who took over Constantinople in 1453. But the Pontic Greek community showed incredible resilience. The unique dialect of these Greeks did not just survive. Because the region was so isolated, just like it happened with Cyprus, their dialect preserved elements that disappeared from the rest of Greek over 1,000 years ago. So linguists today consider it to be a direct live-in bridge to ancient Greek, a true piece of antiquity hidden in plain sight. During the Ottoman occupation now, Pontus was an area inhabited by Islamized Armenians and by Greek-speaking Muslims. Many of them adopted Turkish identities about a century ago to avoid being perceived as foreign. The new Turkey couldn't possibly afford to be as multicultural as the Ottoman Empire used to be. Now, the area of Güneysu, where Recep Tayyip Erdogan is originally from, was historically known as Potamia. The name comes from the Greek word potamos, which means river, hence the word hippopotamus, for instance, which means river horse. I don't know who came up with that name, but it looks nothing like a horse. That name, Potamia, changed in an effort to disconnect the land from its pre-Turkish history. So first they changed the names, and then they removed the people. Between 1914 and 1923, the Turks carried out a systematic extermination of the Greeks in that area. And not only Greeks, but also the Armenians. On May 19 of 1919, so that's really easy to remember, the year 1919, and it was May 19, Mustafa Kemal arrived in Samsun to launch the Turkish War of Independence, as they called it anyway, and that is the day when we commemorate the Greek genocide of Pontus. Historians estimate that at least 353,000 Pontic Greeks were killed back then, and they say 1.5 million Armenians. Mind you, that genocide of the Greeks refers only to that part, not the Greeks that were massacred by the Turks in general. In 2019, the centennial of the genocide, the American House of Representatives and Senate recognized the Armenian and Greek genocides, which coincided practically. Erdogan's response was, "We are saddened that a slander against our country is being accepted by a country's parliament. We would consider this accusation the biggest insult towards our nation." By the way, I'm recording this at noon. There's a lot of noise, there's a lot of things happening around. The neighbor's dog is getting crazy. I don't know what on earth he saw. Turkey accepts that mass atrocities, deportations, and large-scale deaths of Greeks and Armenians took place back then. But they say that those deaths were the result of internal conflict, diseases, and famine. They don't accept that it was a campaign of extermination systematically planned by the Ottoman authorities. Similar things against ethnic minorities like the Greeks have happened again ever since. So it was not a one-time thing. But obviously, all of them are just coincidences. There couldn't possibly be a plan behind them. So while other countries have been more accepting of their history, Turkey refuses the term genocide. Germany, for example, has integrated the acceptance of the Holocaust into its national identity and legal system. That being said, it doesn't mean that Germany has ever paid reparations for destroying Greece. But that is a story for another episode. So look at the duality of Erdogan. On one hand, his roots link him to a region that was historically a center of Greek and Christian civilization. On the other hand, his political career relies on a project of Turkification that tries to finish the work of his Sultan predecessors, both by renaming the land and also by even challenging the maritime borders of Greece. Turkey is promoting the blue homeland, which tries to establish Turkish rights at the expense of Greek islands. Now let's go back to that secret I mentioned in the beginning. Before he became a politician, Erdogan was very good at football. He was so good that the Fenerbahce club wanted to sign him professionally. For a kid from a poor neighborhood, obviously that was the dream, but his father, Ahmet Erdogan, was more traditional. He told his son that football was going to distract him from a real life of faith, and that's why it didn't happen. If his father had said yes, Erdogan might have spent his life in a stadium rather than in a palace trying to change the course of global history and even acting as a mediator between Russia and Ukraine. The irony, a country that constantly threatens a neighbor that it used to occupy, acting like a peacemaker. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to send me your comments and recommendations as I told you. And don't forget to share, rate, and what else? No, that's it. Thank you. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share. Until next time, this is Onoufiros Dovletis signing off from Not Another Greek History Podcast.